All right, perfect. Thanks very much, Liz. Yeah, just as a little bit of background, I was up in the DRC in late March, early April. We were doing a feasibility study for a Kenyan/Congolese company with West African partners for the building of a potential new cement plant in Western DRC. And I mention the partners because I think it is important for us to understand just how different development in Africa is today. That it's not just that we're looking at outside players coming into the market. You've got a whole heap of Kenyan money into this project with a Congolese partner and then with a West African technical partner that are driving this. There's no, from the company structure side, there is no foreign involvement, although in terms of raising finance for the project, they are going global. So they're looking at South African finance houses, they're looking at African finance houses, and they're looking at European finance. So it is a very, very global project. Just in terms of the DRC, to put it into context, because I think it is a country that always needs to be put into context. That's how big it is. It's the size of Western Europe, which makes it a big piece of real estate. The bit that we're interested in is this bit down here, from Kinshasa round about there, down to Matadi port round about here. It's a distance of 350 kilometers, and that is the only tarred road in this part of the country. So you can look at a piece of real estate that's about the size of France, which has one road, 350 kilometers, that's tarred, other than roads in and around Kinshasa itself. Even in Matadi, the main road to the port has disappeared. So just to put that into some kind of context, there's obviously an enormous deficit in terms of infrastructure, in terms of development in the country, but there's also appetite, and I think this is what strikes you when you go there, is to look at that. So the current situation, I think if you look at it, it is still relatively buoyant despite the politics. I was up there in November last year and then again now, so I can compare the two periods. In November last year, it was probably the most tense I've seen Kinshasa since 2005, 2006, just before the elections there. It was really tense. People didn't know what was going to happen with Kabila. Would he step down? Wouldn't he? Of course, he then didn't step down, and nothing happened. Nothing happening is at one level is a good thing. There weren't major, there obviously were some riots and so on, but there wasn't a major meltdown like there had been previously. So things did manage to crack on. One of the things that is quite interesting is that the business community in Kinshasa really is quite ambivalent about the opposition taking over. In fact, I don't think they want them to take over, because they understand that under Kabila there is an infrastructure development plan. There are plans to build the country. You can argue how it's going to happen and how much the first family will benefit from it. But there is still this idea that there are plans under Kabila. But the donors are very reluctant to engage. And obviously there's a lot of private development that's waiting to see what happens. What you do see as well is that the business community and others that you speak to say, well, you know, the problem with the opposition is that there is no united opposition. And I'll come to that. You know, when Etienne Tshisekedi passed away, Joseph Kabila went to the opposition and said, you've got 3 months to come up with a replacement to be my prime minister for this transition to the election period. It's now 6 months and they haven't come up with a candidate. That's the level of infighting amongst the opposition. It's weak, it's dispirited, it's a bit useless. So this is what we're starting to see. There's still relatively good levels of construction in Kinshasa and the surrounds, but not at the level that they should be. So when you're there, a lot of the companies will compare Kinshasa to Luanda. and say, yes, there's development in Kinshasa, but it's still small compared to Angola. Angola, a lot of the businesses in Kinshasa also have businesses in Angola, and some of them in Congo, Brazzaville as well. So there is that. But that said, the city is transforming quite quickly, and particularly in key areas of Kinshasa. As you drive down, you see all the little old single-story buildings are now being knocked down and being turned, so they're all little shops and so on, and they're being knocked down, and you're having sort of 2 to 5 story buildings that are mixed use, retail at the bottom and then apartments above them. And there's a lot of that going on, scattered around the city. That said, the majority of Kinshasa are still highly impoverished. And you don't have to drive that far outside of Kinshasa to see people who are living still in incredibly basic conditions. I think less than 50 k's outside Kinshasa, we were driving through villages on the way down to Matadi where there wasn't a single cement bag being sold because there's just no ability to pay for it. And that's the level that people are living at. So you do need to understand that even though in that little axis there's about 12 or 14 million people, probably less than 1 million of them have what we would consider to be formal sector purchasing power. Most of the local industrial companies are either expanding at the moment or they have plans. And that's not just industrial, it's also commercial property, retail developments, entertainment complexes. Guys are sitting there with plans and they're saying, as soon as things turn, we're going ahead. There is always the understanding in Kinshasa that you've got about a year to get stuff done or risk things going belly up again. But that said, there is the sense that as soon as the political direction is sorted out, and that as soon as it becomes clear that the donor community is going to re-engage, I saw in the news this week that a new tranche of Kabila's close associates have had sanctions placed on them, so they're tightening the screws a bit, and people are adopting a wait-and-see attitude. So once there's more political certainty, that will start. The road to Matadi was completed 4 years ago. It's already deteriorating. Bearing in mind that the ports, and there's now more than one port at Matadi, that's the only, and that road, that 350-kilometer road between Kinshasa and Matadi, services about 45 million people in the western half of the Congo. It's the only source of trade, unless you use Congo, Brazzaville, and come across that way, but that's more expensive. So it's a major issue. You can already see how parts of the road are subsiding. There's obviously, it's just been slapped down as a tarmac. It's getting potholed in places. It's getting corrugated. So it's not looking particularly good. Obviously, it's worse on the Matadi to Kinshasa side because that's where the heavy trucks are coming and going back relatively empty. The port of Matadi now has competition from a number of adjacent ports. Sokope, which was the old fishing port round the corner, for those of you who know where the existing port is. If you go down the river and round the corner, you'll see Sokope. I've got a couple of slides of that. Is now converting itself from being simply an old fishing port into being a bulk terminal. Because you now have 2 operational cement plants, being the old Silu plant and now the Nyumba Ya Akiba plant, Lucky Cement from Pakistan, are operating. PPC's plant will come online this year, and then the study that we were doing for a 4th plant to come online probably in the next 2 years. So you're going to then see imports of probably somewhere around 30,000 tons of coal a month, and maybe about 25 to 30,000 tons of other inputs like gypsum and chemicals coming through. So they're setting themselves up to do that. There's also a MGT, is a container terminal that's being operated by local investors in conjunction with SCTP that own Matadi Port. And there's a fuels terminal that's being developed between Sokope and Matadi Port. So there's a lot of new developments. And then the grain companies have their own dedicated terminal. Because of that, the original SCTP port has dropped its own charges from by about 40%, just to be able to keep some of their clients. The port itself is still in pretty dodgy condition. They've got some of the most robust scrap iron on the continent because none of their equipment works, or very little of it works, so it all just stands on the side and it looks like these cranes and gantries, and it's all fantastic, but none of it works, so it just sits there rotting. Volumes substantially down on last year. I think we've seen that across a number of countries. In Mozambique, for instance, yesterday chatting to one of the importers who imported 150 containers last year and in 2015, and only 51 last year. So you can see there's been a dramatic drop. Nigeria, the port throughput is down by about 40%. So it's not unique to Congo, but it is an issue. There still remains this enormous potential for things like agriculture, but it's completely informal. The bananas it's no longer Bakongo, because remember they've split the country into now 27, I think, provinces. So it's now called Congo Central. But until the power is being sorted out, and they are bulking it up, the potential for cold storage and exports then becomes a factor, but it's not there at the moment. So that is something that hopefully will come along soon. Chatting to people as well, they say, Kinshasa, it's like a rubber ball underwater. You push it under and it just pops up again. Bearing in mind that it's now the largest French-speaking city on the planet, with about, pick a number, 9 million, 12 million. Yours is as good as mine as a guess. So it does just keep popping up. And the business community feels that Kabila did provide the stability that they needed to operate properly there, and needed to get the donors on board for development. But his third-term aspirations are likely to damage that. Sanctions against some of his key allies to put pressure on him. And it's a very political business environment. And I think those of you who've done business there will know that. Local companies can be very powerful, demand subcontracts. You have different cliques. You have the Belgian clique, you have the Lebanese clique, you have the Indian clique. You don't really have a South African clique. You have South Africans running around trying to do business with all and sundry. So it is quite a political environment. There is still a large amount of money in the system and driving private sector development. And as one of the guys said to me, it used to be just churches in the Congo, but luckily today there's more banks than churches. So he was quite happy that people are placing their faith in the financial system in addition to the churches. Future scenario, much of it depends on the transition from Kabila to what? And that's the great uncertainty. Nobody knows who will emerge, whether it'll be somebody from Kabila's inner circle. Bearing in mind that Joseph Kabila doesn't have a political party, he has a whole lot of people that support him. So it is a problem. Despite this, the local investors remain bullish, continue to expand their operations in Kinshasa and into the hinterland. And I think this is something to understand, is that a lot of the companies are operating as far as Kisangani, which takes about 30 days by boat. And then as the roads projects are starting to open up the hinterland, you can now get to some of the cities, not as far as Mbuji-Mayi, but certainly further inland. What used to take a week now takes about 7 or 8 hours. So it is starting to open up at that level, and obviously the cost of goods comes down. So they're through to Kikwit. Also, it's still gravel, but it has reduced the travel times. You can get from Cape Town to Kinshasa by road with a little bit of luck and all the rest of it. ShopRite are already doing that. They're sending their trucks up from Cape Town and Joburg. But the problem is that the bridge at Lufu, which is the main road transit point, it's about 200 km south of Kinshasa. The bridge has collapsed because of the overloaded trucks that were coming across it. So you can still get smaller trucks bringing things like beer and Coke and washing powder and that kind of stuff. But your heavy trucks, your articulated trucks, can't get across. So they have to go through either the port of Matadi or Ango, which is the border between Angola and Matadi. The Angolan border is right on the port of Matadi. It's right there. In fact, from Sokope, you can jump in the water and swim 20 meters, and you're officially in Angolan territory. So it is there. There we've talked about the cement plants and what it's done. And what it's done as well is it's dropped the price. And it's really critical, particularly in an infrastructure deficient environment, dropping the price from over $300 a ton, and sometimes it was up to $400. It's now much more stable at between $140 and $180, probably going to drop to about $120 a ton, and maybe down to $100 a ton over the longer term. So for people who are looking at development, that's a good thing. What I've done is just put together some of the pictures. It's not all great news. This is in central Kinshasa. The old center of Kinshasa has effectively been abandoned by government, so that's kind of right in the middle of it. Some of the new building going on, you can see there the overloaded trucks with the coal that's coming in from Matadi. That's the Kempinski Hotel overlooking the river. It's very beautiful. Some of the construction activity that's happening, but also some of the old derelict buildings that dot the landscape in Kinshasa, and the piles of rubbish that you get. This is just a quick look at the cement story. So even during this period of great uncertainty in the DRC, you can see as the global economy collapsed, there still was this relatively buoyant consumption of around about 1 million tons a year. For a country that size, 1 million tons a year is not very much. Our expectation is that within the next 5 years, all things being equal, that consumption will treble as projects get unlocked and investors have more certainty over the environment there. The road, this is the road. Now, this is the national highway. So if we talk about an N1 highway from our perspective, it's not what, the road just literally goes through all the villages. That's, you can see it was raining quite heavily. You get the trucks that still overturned on the side of the road. Congolese drive like bats out of hell. In fact, lousy roads are the best traffic calming measures I've seen in the Congo. Paul and I have experienced this down in Lubumbashi, and that's the kind of overloading of the trucks that you'll find as you go along. And then this is coming into Matadi. You can't really see it, I don't think, but some of the degradation of the road, which is only a couple of years old, and the ubiquitous policeman looking for a handout on the side of the road. I spoke to a South African guy who drove from Angola through to Kinshasa. It took him 17 hours to do from Lufu to Kinshasa. It should take you about 4. It took him 17 hours because he drove himself, and he had to do a lot of negotiation with these guys. I was lucky that I had Congolese drivers. In Matadi itself, this is the main road to the port. So you can imagine trying to get cargo in and out. That's one of the reasons why the port can't do more than 3 million tons a year, because this is how it is. And this is in a period where there's low congestion. As soon as you get past the trucks, the road disappears. And there is actually you can see where it used to be tarred, not anymore. This is from the port, wasn't supposed to take it. And across there, on the other side of the river, just downstream from here is the bridge that goes across, and then you go up 50 or 60 kilometers to where the fabled Inga Falls and the power projects are allegedly going to happen. I wanted to go up there and visit it, but they said it would take me 3 days to get the paperwork right. So we couldn't, we didn't have time for that. Here's just a little overview of Sokope Port. The guy who's now bought the port is a businessman based in Matadi. He owns logistics companies, distribution, food, power, all sorts of stuff, and he now owns this lovely concession of land. This is Angola, and this is just past here is Angola as well. So what they're doing is they're building the new quay, they're doing all of this, and they are negotiating with the railway company. The Belgian guys told me that the negotiations are going very well by Congolese standards to try and get their bit of rail rehabilitated to take bulk cargoes up to the rest of the country. So that, in a nutshell, is what's happening up in the Congo at the moment. It's one of those countries that is absolutely hamstrung by the politics at the moment. That said, the domestic business community is quite bullish that they've got lots of money hidden under mattresses or wherever they've kept it, and that as soon as things turn, they will be able to start doing quite a lot of development themselves. So it's a slightly difficult situation, but you know, as soon as the politics settles down and becomes a little bit more predictable, there's a lot that's on the table, whether it's private sector or whether it's large infrastructure projects being funded by the donors. And that's it. Thank you very much.